Hello, everyone. My name's Duncan White. I'm the managing editor of the International Fire and Safety Journal, and I'm delighted today to be talking to Nathaniel Thomas-Hall from Evac Chair. Nathaniel, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, Duncan. Yeah, thank you for having me today. It's always good to collaborate and build with yourselves. So yeah, really looking forward to today's session.
Me also, my friend. It's great to catch up with people and look at things that are emerging within the industry. And today's subject is hugely important. But before we get into that, Nathaniel, tell the listener a little bit about you, your role, and a little bit more about Evac Chair.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Nathaniel. I've been with Evac Chair now for going on 8 years. My role is head of export and innovation. So very proud to say that I'm a key part in both sales and development of new products within the brand. The brand itself has been going for around 40 plus years now. Started in the early 1980s. And from then till now, our main mission has been to support safe and inclusive evacuation for everyone. And that being the key kind of point for everyone. I think a lot of people look at our products and think that they're for sections of society that have mobility issues. And while that may be true in the margins, there is actually a wider use for our chairs, which comes into preparedness and making sure that everyone has the ability to be evacuated safely should they need to. So hopefully we'll touch a bit more on that today, Duncan, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an overview of who we are. As a company as a whole, we ship to over 78 countries globally. And typical sectors for us include care, education, stadiums, arenas, healthcare, hospitality. You name it, we're there, or should be at least. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Fantastic. It sets the scene, gives us an understanding of who you are and what Evac Chair provides. And I doubt that anybody listening to this podcast hasn't seen one of your products at some point. It's just that they sit there minding their own business, doing exactly what they're supposed to do, being available at the point that they're required, but they blend into the background. But like you say, it's they're there for the evacuation of anybody. Yes, anybody can require evacuation at any time, not just those within the healthcare arena. And it's that ability to provide something that does the job without it being overly complicated. And I think that you guys have certainly nailed that. We're going to move on now. We're going to touch on Martin's Law, and for the listener that is not aware of Martin's Law, you'll certainly be aware of the Manchester Arena tragedy and the way in which the law is currently changing. That piece of law will be known as Martin's Law, and it's going to have a huge implication on all walks of life, and predominantly the focus will be on places of public entertainment under Martin's Law and the organisations and their responsibilities. Give us a little bit more background of that, Nathaniel.
Yeah, sure. And I think you touched on a point there, Duncan. It's the responsibilities of venues, and that is going to be really critically important over the next year and a half, as we're now currently around 9 months into assent was received. And in 2027 is when we'll see this become actually enforceable. So Martin's Law, as you discussed, was brought into legislation on the back of the Manchester Arena bombings, horrific events that we saw back in May 2017, in which unfortunately the lives of 22 people were taken by, heinous kind of terrorist act in Manchester. On the back of that, there was a lot of campaigning done to ensure that this is something we don't see happen again. One of the biggest campaigners was a lady by the name of Fegan Murray, whose son was tragically murdered on that day in Manchester. On the back of her hard work and the hard work of many others, we saw the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act of 2025 actually go through court. and get signed off. And we're now in what we're calling kind of this embedment kind of period, which does enforce in 2027. So venues really need to kind of be understanding now and getting prepared now for some of the implications it's going to have for them. And there's going to be a number of venues that are going to be implicated by some of this legislation that comes in when it's enforced by 2027. So preparedness now is really, really important, because, you know, that day, April in 2027, will come around really, really quickly. So I would really, really urge companies to use the time wisely, talk to those who are doing research in and around Martin's Law and looking at how they can help prepare, such as Evac Chair International. It applies in particular to venues with over 200 people. So they can range from, you know, schools to places of worship, arenas, you name it. And it is tiered. So there's a standard tier, which has a number of requirements, and then an enhanced tier, which goes even further on some of those requirements. But it's all around protecting people, reducing risk, and strengthening preparedness for people who are using public venues and public buildings. Implications of this are going to include fines, prosecution, and not to mention, Duncan, the reputational damage that companies will face if they're not prepared well ahead of time. You know, this 24-month period that companies have been given, this window of time to get prepared, is actually quite generous, because there's an argument to be made here that those things should have been in place some time ago. So the fact you've got this 24-month window is not something to kind of rest on your laurels, as you kind of touched on earlier. It's something to make sure you use in the right manner to get yourself educated on what's required for your particular building, and to make sure you've got the right equipment and procedures to handle the legislation when it does come into enactment in 2027. There is also a part of this which looks at kind of preparedness beyond terrorism. You know, there's a number of things that can happen in a commercial building which aren't terrorism related, but still would require a business to be prepared to ensure they can keep their staff, their visitors safe and get them out in an emergency.
Totally agree. And the 24-month grace period is, like you say, hugely generous. But this is nothing new. It shouldn't take something of this magnitude to kickstart things again. Everybody's got a responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act and the management of health and safety, and that whole organisational preparedness requires them to look at it. And it's interesting what you say about the Martin's Law talks about 200 plus, but I think we should ignore the number. Any bona fide organisation that is worth their credibility will look at whether it's 1, 200, or 2,000. The same rules should apply, and the reputational risk is huge, and it's very hard work to get a brand and an image, but it can be lost within seconds, and we all know companies and individuals that have paid the price for that over the years. But again, the underlying part of what we've just heard there from Nathaniel is use this 24 months wisely. If you're listening to this and you've got any concerns, then you had the offer from Evac Chair International. Reach out, have a chat, and these guys are there to help and give you the benefit of their experience. So in terms of that, Nathaniel, how can Evac Chair International help organisations? What are you able to do for them if they're not quite sure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think one of the key things we're doing is really taking kind of a front step in pioneering with a lot of the awareness. There's a number of awareness campaigns you would have seen potentially already, and we'll be seeing in the coming months, and that we're going to be putting out to make sure that businesses within, you know, our client space and all the businesses that we're advertising towards just are aware of the general top line implications for themselves when it comes to Martin's Law. So awareness is a kind of big step that we're taking to kind of push the message out. but also in education. So it's something that we're reinforcing when we're doing our numerous training courses day in, day out. We're reinforcing to our clients on site. We're reinforcing on phones when we're speaking to FMs and to larger buildings and residences. We're just constantly reinforcing that this legislation is coming and that, we can help you get in position to manage your evacuation response, essentially to keep everyone safe and to prepare yourself for what's coming. Something else we're looking at as well is our evacuation assessments, which we've had for quite some time now. These are totally free of charge, and they involve us going to an organization's site and doing essentially a full assessment of what's in place, what evacuation equipment they have, what equipment they need, but also reviewing some of the legislation that may apply to them. So in those buildings that do have, that do meet the criteria of Martin's Law, talking to them about that. But to your point, Duncan, it's not just the larger buildings or the venues that take over 200 people that need to be aware of this. Every company needs to be aware that this legislation is coming. And I think it marks a general shift towards the government being quite positive around responsibilities of business owners. If you're inviting multiple people onto site, whether that be 10, 20, 100, those people should feel as though you take their safety as paramount, right? That's what we all want to feel as though when we go into any public space, that someone has considered our safety and how we get out should there be an issue.
Exactly, and I think what is worthy of note at this point is that the evacuation and the ability to evacuate people isn't just for premises with floors above the ground. You still need to have a position in respect of emergency evacuation procedures for ground floor premises, because you may well need somebody becomes incapacitated, and you have to have a way and a method of evacuating them. And this is a common myth. Oh, we've got no stairs. We're on the ground floor. We don't need to worry about it. It's only for getting people downstairs. No, that's not the case. This is the real world. Somebody may fall over. They may need to be evacuated. The wheelchair they came in on may not be suitable and sufficient to get them out in an emergency because it's not quick enough, and so the responsible person needs to take action and put in place a system that meets that need.
That's a very good point, Duncan. And we've all seen it. Sporting injuries and things of the like are very prevalent. We've all seen that working in offices where colleagues or ourselves have been affected by things like this. And that might be someone who's perfectly, able to get in on crutches or whatever other devices to help them from a mobility standpoint. When it comes to an actual emergency and getting someone out quickly, where speed is of the essence, it's just not going to cut it. Them kind of hobbling on someone's back or by themselves to struggle their way out. This is where, like you said, some of the horizontal evacuation products we have, like the 200H, or even our, ascending chair product like the 1000H we launched last year, allows people to get up and out of, ground floor up to kind of, from basement level up to ground floor and then out with ease. So it's a very good point, Duncan. It's not just your typical descent when people think evacuation chairs. It's why we're so proud of having kind of the widest range and options available, so that we always have something we can offer to our customers to ensure they're fully covered for any eventuality.
And I think what is coming across to me and what it demonstrates is that the Evac Chair are being very proactive, very responsible in respect of making end users aware of what's coming. And I use a phrase that you can't not know what you know. People think that if they forget something or they just don't want to think about it, that they can play out that they weren't aware of it. That doesn't cut the mustard anymore, and the law's there to deal with them accordingly. So this isn't a nice to do. This is a must do, and it's a must do with a capital M, because when you've got a piece of legislation backing the must do, it certainly opens the eyes. And we're going to have a period where there's going to be some leniency, but there's going to be leniency and tolerance to people that are genuinely showing a willingness to do something. Those people that are just ignoring it, then the weight of the law, quite rightly, will come down on them like a ton of bricks. And let's not forget why we've got this piece of law. It shouldn't take a tragedy of this magnitude to kickstart this, but fair play to you guys at Evac Chair International for getting this moving. Nathaniel, Martin's Law, in respect of venues, there's some key responsibilities there. Give us a very brief overview of the challenges that the organisations are going to face.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things is that, they're going to have to look at making sure first they do a little bit of an audit to understand where they are now against the legislation. So I think looking at their building layouts, looking to any limitations to access, that's going to be one of the key things you're going to want to look at. So what's the state of play, as things lay now? For every venue should be kind of looking at that. Then looking at kind of staff confidence. Do you have the people in place who feel confident in the products and the procedures and the equipment necessary? And then addressing any training gaps that may arise from those conversations with staff, and being really clear about the roles. So, does a responsible person understand, all of the weight of that role in particular? How they then deputize operators for bits of kit and equipment, and are they trained and aware of their responsibilities? So it really starts from just doing that kind of initial audits, not just of your some of your paperwork and documentation, but also of the staff, and then looking at almost playing through some of those unpredictable scenarios. And if we look at the landscape when it comes to kind of terrorism, last year alone, the police made 248 arrests, the counter-terrorism police, which is the highest number of arrests in a single year since 2019. So it's unfortunate that these bigger kind of events are the ones that grab headlines, and it's unfortunate these things happen, at all in the first place. But there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that for the lay person like myself, you might not know. There's a lot of these things that police are intercepting. Counter-terrorism police and MI5 have disrupted 43 late-stage attacks from taking place since 2017. These things are occurring. And although, it might seem unpredictable, or like the chance of this happening in a building are very limited or small, it's very important that we put ourselves in the environment where we're able to talk through some of these scenarios and understand, how do we make decisions under pressure if something like this was to occur? And then also, how do we organize high volumes of people, including those who are mobility impaired, who might have particular things we need to be acutely aware of? How do we organize them and keep them safe and make sure that we're able to evacuate them all in these time critical scenarios? So a lot there, Duncan, if I'm being honest, but it's why companies like us are putting ourselves out there, creating the awareness, creating the education, and saying, look, pick up the phone and call us. You're not going to be the only ones going through this and trying to manage and navigate all of this. Let us help you with this and give you some context, and perhaps give you some of the tools as well to help you get at least some of the ticks in those boxes, if not all. We've done this before. We've been doing this for quite some time. We go back to 2001 with unfortunately 9/11, that horrific event we saw in New York, Twin Towers. Our chairs we used there to save the lives of 5 people during that tragedy. They're 5 lives that wouldn't be here today had they not taken a proactive approach. We've been prepared and having our products. Now, at the time, I'm sure that wouldn't have been seen as being, at all predictable that someone would have done something to that magnitude. But again, they were prepared, and the lives of those 5 individuals were saved because of their preparedness. So it just goes into saying that the help is out there, and we want the companies that are willing and prepared to help with it. So I would encourage all companies not to bury their head, under the weight of how some of this stuff can seem or sound. Pick up the phone, speak to companies like ourselves, and let's help you kind of navigate your way through this.
Exactly, and wise words indeed there, my friend. The situation we find ourselves in, and we see this time and time again, it's not about having the correct paperwork. The paperwork is just one aspect of it. And what we're going to start seeing very soon, I have no doubts, is that there's going to be an audit process in place where it may well be a mystery shopper type scenario where somebody comes in and looks at whether what it says on the paper is actually what they're seeing in the tin. Because believe me, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of venues got the best paperwork in the world that they've brought somebody in to deliver for them. But that's just one part of the jigsaw puzzle. The very big part that they tend to forget is the management action. It's the management action and the way that piece of paper is dealt with and how that message is communicated with the people on the shop floor, if you like, when things are going on. And like you say, we never expect it to happen, and we hope it will never happen. But when it does, we are prepared, because it's the training and the tabletop exercises that make the difference between life and death when something goes wrong and somebody needs to be moved very quickly. And let's not forget that the people buying the tickets to go and see the Ariana Grande concert were expecting a fantastic show in a venue that was safe and being looked after by competent people. Well, there were a number of failures that night, and I make no bones about using the word failures. There were failures across the board, both within the private and the public sector, that we're still feeling the effects of. And I hope that the public sector organisations learn very quickly from this, because they have a duty and they should have known better. The private sector need a good kick and to bring themselves up and provide the services that we expect, having paid good money, hard-earned money, to come to an event. So this is always going to be a hard-hitting subject. We could talk about this all morning, and it's something that I'm certainly very passionate about. But to keep this on track, because otherwise the big red light is going to be flashing and we're going to be running out of time. But I think to bring this all together, we've talked about emergency preparedness, we've talked about evacuation planning. So just to sum up, Nathaniel, in respect of all those bits, what can Evac Chair International do for the person listening to this podcast who's thinking, I really need to get some advice and guidance on this?
Yeah, so great question, Duncan. So I think the first thing we can do is just have conversations with people, similar to the conversation that we're having here today, just to understand, where are they now? I'd agree with you totally that there's a lot of venues that haven't historically lived up to, expectations as far as taking preparedness seriously. And having the means, methods, and equipment we would hope they have for keeping us all safe. But I think our position with this is less trying to point the finger, because we understand these things are difficult, but more just trying to work with companies from where they are now. And I must say I'm encouraged by the fact, Duncan, that we are getting calls from a number of companies now who are asking us to come into site to do our free assessment with them and talk them through what is it they need, how do they navigate not only this particular bit of legislation we're talking about with Martin's Law, but also the rest of the kind of legislative landscape. How do they navigate all of this in a way in which is, cost effective, but also practical. And I think that's where, as a company, we move kind of past just pure compliance and move more into kind of the true meaning of responsibility, and reinforce through that our kind of purpose and our values through helping companies get, much more compliant from where they are now. So I think for us, we've got to look at kind of the human impact. The fact of the matter is, being prepared is truly important, because you're allowing yourself in a position that if the worst happens, you're able to save lives. With training and maintenance, you're able to kind of ensure you're reducing panic. You're encouraging people to have confidence in the products, and they have a set, procedure to follow should they need to get somebody out in an emergency. I think, it's responsibility of organizations definitely to create safe environments, but we can most definitely help them with that with our 4 decades of experience. And also it kind of ties into our heritage and our overall ethos, and why inclusive evacuation for us has remained kind of the focus for some decades.
It's not often you get an offer of something for nothing, but that's certainly what you've heard here today, folks. That Evac Chair International are offering to give you assistance. They said a free FREE, zero money, no cost. So, in my book, that's great value for money. Nathaniel, my friend, it's been great. Like I said, this we could well find ourselves doing a follow up to this in a few months' time, because we can then start gauging and seeing whether people have taken the hint that it's free and made your phone ring off the hook. So hopefully that will take effect. Any more advice required, then evacchair.co.uk is where you need to be going. You'll get all the advice, guidance, and contact details for the experts like Nathaniel from the website. I think the last thing for me to say is this is real, this is happening, this needs to be planned for now. So after listening to this, get your Google search engine in operation and start looking at what your responsibilities are. Nathaniel, thank you, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Duncan. And I'm really looking forward to taking you up on that invitation to come back again and discuss this or other things at length. It's been really good. And I think, to your point about where to reach out to us, we are at SHW coming up fairly soon. So please come and speak to us then. We'd love to talk to you about your particular scenario or environment or building and see how we can help navigate some of this. And I think overall, I'd like to just end by saying, I know some of this can seem cumbersome. They can seem from a business owner's perspective that there's a lot of legislation for them to consider and take on board. But this is where companies like ourselves, like Evac Chair International, really are committed to stepping in and helping you kind of guide or provide guidance through this for yourself and for your staff to make sure everyone is kept safe. So, don't delay to kind of pick that phone and speak to us. Preparedness doesn't have to be daunting or scary.
Exactly. And it may seem cumbersome, but it's not as cumbersome as walking every day into the court to start answering questions from the prosecution. So there's your offer of help. I'm Duncan White. I'm the managing editor of the International Fire and Safety Journal, and I've had the pleasure today to be joined by Nathaniel Thomas-Hall from Evac Chair International. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.